Our next guest will be Nancy Talbot, who is president of BLT Research of Boston. Nancy investigates the effects on crops of a little-known energy or a matter that is called plasma. It's a fourth state of matter, and it may be a basic element in creation. Nancy measures these energies in crop circles, proving that many of them could not be man-made. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Were you attracted to this research through the same type of experiences that John Burke had with the natural earth energies and phenomena that he observed?
I think John's work is very interesting and is perhaps applicable to certain aspects of the crop circle phenomenon, in particular the geomagnetic aspects, the idea that earth energies may be attracting an atmospheric energy system of some kind to these areas where the crop circles occur.
So as we discussed with John, there are certain areas that perhaps crop circles occur in more often because of that geomagnetic energy or the structures underneath the soil.
This last summer it was very interesting. Underneath southern England, of course, you have an aquifer, a chalk aquifer.
Yes.
And John measured the ground electrical charge in southern England over the summer. And as the aquifer lowers, as the water table lowers, the ground electric charge is increased. And curiously, the number of crop circles increase also as the summer progresses. Furthermore, this electric charge is greatest at the edges of the aquifer. And lo and behold, many of the crop circles occur at the edges of the aquifers. So it's tantalizing. It suggests a connection.
Well, that's fascinating. And so your research shows that perhaps these earth energies attract other energies from the atmosphere in some way that may be responsible for creating these crop circles.
Well, William Levengood, the biophysicist in Michigan, demonstrated very clearly that there are changes in the plants and in the soils which are consistent with exposure to a plasma.
For those who don't know, could you explain what a plasma is?
I'll use John Burke's explanation because it's the simplest one for me. Electrified, it's electrified air molecules. Now, an example of a plasma that you would be familiar with is a lightning strike, a lightning bolt. That's a high energy plasma. A low energy plasma would be your fluorescent lights, for instance. That's a plasma, a low energy plasma.
I was just going to ask if it's related to the northern lights or the aurora borealis.
Well, the northern lights is another display, but again, a relatively low energy plasma discharge. Now, Levengood's idea was that perhaps if science has only learned in the last 10, 15 years that these plasmas can penetrate the reflective layers of the ionosphere down to 5, 6, 7, 8 miles, that perhaps they could penetrate all the way down to the Earth's surface. And the result would be these crop circles. There's enough evidence here to suggest this is a reasonable approach to the phenomenon. And if we now look at the plant work and the soil results, and I show you exactly what's happened to the plants and what's happened to the soils, and how that can be related to this discharge of a plasma, it becomes even more reasonable. Whether it's the final reality, I don't know. But the job of science is to get the data and then see where the data leads you.
In crop circles, the wheat is bent at an angle and often is permanently bent at that angle and stays in that shape.
This is rapeseed, canola, a very thick plant. Clearly, this plant would fracture if you tried to bend it.
That's what's very interesting about these crop circles, that in many cases the crop is very brittle, and if it were mechanically bent, it would break.
It would break and shatter. You can flatten this stuff until you're blue in the face, and you're not going to produce these results.
Well, that's important for people to know, because I think the general consensus out there has been that these are fake, that they're hoaxes, they're created by people going out with ropes and boards. And
well, that's what they've been told, haven't they?
They have been told that.
This is the first time, the first opportunity, as far as I know, for the public to actually hear some facts. Another thing the American public is unaware of is that crop circles occur here in the States and in Canada and in countries all over the world.
That's another reason why it would be difficult for the people who claim that they've created the crop circles to have
Doug
created them.
and Dave were very busy.
Doug and Dave, two little men who went out after the
pub's
drinks at the
closed.
pub, did not make all the crop circles in the world.
Well, if they did, they somehow or other managed to be in 5 or 6 countries simultaneously. But one of the first findings that Levengood obtained was node elongation. The nodes are knuckle-like protuberances along the stem of the plant.
And these are samples that are taken from crop circles.
Yeah, these are. But let me explain this. The nodes are the part of the plant that holds the most water. Plasmas automatically, when they spiral, emit microwaves. What do microwaves do? If you have a microwave oven, the microwaves go to the water molecules in whatever it is you're cooking. Well, what we found is in the plants, here we have the majority of the water is at the nodes, and what happens is that water turns to steam, and as it evaporates, it stretches the tender part of the top part of the plant, the apical node. Now, the same thing happens lower down on the stems, but there, because the outer fibers are tough, they're not elastic, they won't stretch. The steam, in order to get out, has to actually blow a hole. Here are these holes blown out at the nodes. Again, the steam pressure inside the plant stem is so intense, the steam has to escape. And in the tougher tissue down at the base of the plant, it explodes these holes.
And this is mature crop.
This was fully mature when it occurred. This is the formation itself at Stanton St. Bernard in England.
This is a very elaborate formation, actually. It has a number of different circles.
When you hear this talk about simple circles are the only ones that are genuine, I beg to differ.
Well, in fact, that is the impression that many people have, that the simple circles are maybe caused by a whirlwind or some phenomena that would create something not so complex. But these are very elaborate and beautiful formations.
These changes that Levengood has documented now for 12 years absolutely cannot be caused by flattening, mechanical flattening, planks, boards, feet, cement rollers. In addition to this sort of work, which Levengood has repeated, we did, during the years that we were doing this very actively, I think we managed some 250 formations around the world in 8 different countries that were sampled in depth, producing consistently these changes.
Well, this is the type of work that will prove that this is a real phenomenon. Other people are speculating. You're actually doing the research.
Most people are not aware that crop circles occur in all sorts of material.
Yes, that's right. I think most people assume that they're all in wheat, but they're not.
Oats, barley, rye, all sorts of cereal crops. They also occur in grasses. We have them all the time in grasses. Later on, we're going to talk about one that I saw happen in string beans.
Nancy had a very amazing experience that we will go into in depth later.
Now, if the science weren't enough to convince me, that really was. This is a growth anomaly at the base of the seed head. You see that spiraled thing?
The stalk is actually bent in a spiral.
The energy that caused that change had to have occurred when the plants were very young.
I see.
Now, the formation didn't occur until August. So what's happening here? In other words, there were no flattened plants until August, and yet Levengood is positive that this had to occur, let's say, in late June, at an early growth stage.
That's very curious, isn't it?
Now, the reason I bring this up is that I know you've talked about and have heard about these balls of light.
The orbs
that are seen around crop circles and videotaped.
Yes.
I have no idea whether this has anything to do with it, but the orbs are photographed and videotaped frequently over fields in which subsequently crop circles are found.
So maybe this isn't just a one-step process.
Maybe it's a 2-stage or more.
Yes.
That's the question now. Now, among Levengood's other work, one of the things that he has done for years is do germinations. The lower photograph here are some samples, a sample and a control, from a formation in California. Now, this happened to be in grasses, no cereal crop at all. What happened in this case, Levengood had taken some clippings from these plants to do a test he calls the Radox test, and had put them back in the box, forgotten about them. They sat there for over a week. And one day he opened up the box to see whether it was something he had to do or had already done. and found these. Now, no light, no water for 8, 9, 10 days, whatever it was. You can see the control is dead, and look at the formation.
That's fantastic, amazing. The control is brown and dried up. The one that was in the dark and not watered is
Both of them.
lush and green and bigger.
I mean, obviously, the formation was doing just fine. The controls died under normal circumstances. Most plants will die given no water and no light for 7 or 8 days.
Now, does this relate to what John Burke was saying about perhaps in ancient cultures, in the ancient monuments and mounds, the seeds were taken there for the purpose of energizing them?
One wonders.
One does.
One wonders.
When we're talking about the same energies.
It sounds like we may be, and the question, of course, is did ancient people, were they aware of this? And if they were, how did they become aware? I'm almost as interested in knowing how they found it out as whether or not they did know it.
Maybe they weren't as primitive as we think that they were.
Perhaps they were not.
Nancy, I'd like to ask you if Levengood has done any other research related to the crop circles other than with the plants.
Oh, yeah, he did look at soils. A fortuitous event in 1993 at Churhill in England. This is in the Wiltshire area. A crop circle had occurred at the very end of the season there. This is late August. It was discovered that something that looked like a metallic glaze. It was not only covering the plants, it was actually embedded in them. Here is a photograph to show how it is embedded in.
This is really quite remarkable. There are little round pellets of metal that are embedded into the...
Tiny little pieces, literally inside the husks of the wheat seeds. This one is marvelous. It shows a bubble. You see, this is underneath a scanning electron microscope, and that tiny little, that bubble is one little piece of this, one little molecule of the iron bubbling up because it was hot.
If there was that much heat, Nancy, why didn't the crop catch on fire?
Because the heat was happening up in the atmosphere is part of it. The heat was dissipated by the time it actually hit the crop. But also there is a very thin waxy covering on the outside of plants. And if the heat is brief enough, the plant can be protected because of that. And these are photographs to show you. We found repeatedly now 75–80% of the crop circles that we investigate have this molten iron chunks, in the soil, or these tiny little spheres. Now again, what happens to molten iron when you drop it? How did we make bullets in the Revolutionary War? We heated up lead and we dumped it off of towers.
That's what makes it round.
That's what makes it round. And we find these little round spheres everywhere inside crop circles.
The research is beyond doubt. You've done very careful studies. It's published in scientific journals. Why do people still think that these are made by two little men with boards in the middle of the night?
Mostly it's because that's what they've been told. I think the public, when they're presented with the facts, when they are actually aware of what we know, I think at that point the public will ask some very good questions. The public's not stupid. They simply have been treated as if they were stupid by the majority of the media. So if the media is misinforming the public, well, the scientists are being misinformed too.
Now, Nancy, I know that you started out as a skeptic in all of this.
Not really a skeptic. I was extremely cautious in what I was going to think about. I had a certain emotional response to the designs. They were very strange, very intriguing. But I've had a demonstration, several actually now, and one very dramatic one last summer, where I saw a formation occur right in front of my face. And when you see it, it's impossible to escape. I guarantee you there were no planks and boards. I had been with a young man in Holland who's very unusual and has crop circles happen around him. And every night he and I had gone out to take photographs in crop circles because you sometimes get very strange photographs in crop circles at night, and he loves to do that. And this particular night he wanted to go back out again, and I was irritated. And I said to him, that I was sick and tired of the phenomenon. Why couldn't it be more explicit, easier to study? Why was it so hard to study? And the hell with it, I was going upstairs and going to bed. Well, I got into my nightgown, I was sitting in the bed reading for a while, and I started to hear the cattle in the barn right down the road begin to bellow. Now, I know from talking to hundreds, if not thousands by now, of farmers and field, ranch hands and people, that when crop circles occur, frequently you have this animal disturbance. I stayed in the bed and I kept reading. The cattle became quiet. A little bit, 5-10 minutes elapsed, and then they started again. And this time they were really bellowing. It was very loud. Well, the next thing that happened was this tube of light, a column or a tube, perfectly even all the way down.
Like a shaft coming down?
Came screaming down from above. I have never seen anything, I hope I never see anything again with quite that much energy. I don't know how to explain the force with which that thing came down. But here was this tube of brilliant light, and it lasted for a few seconds, and then it disappeared. There was no sound, there was no smell, nothing. It was like it didn't happen. And I was kind of just startled. And then, boom, another one, almost in exactly the same location as the first. And again, the outside lit up, the inside lit up. There was this incredible force. And then it went out. And before I could get out of bed, a third one came down. And it was such force that you tend to go like this. I mean,
it was very bright.
I wasn't quite
for
sure just how close it was. And I wasn't sure it wasn't going to get me. But anyhow, I'm yelling for Robert by this time, and he is halfway up the stairs because he's seen it. He's yelling for me. And we went immediately to the fence, and I had a flashlight, and I shined it over. And there, in the closest growing crop to my bed, and in full view from the bed, I might add, was this brand new crop circle.
So this was a demonstration to you of everything that you had studied
pretty clear
occurring
one.
Right in front of you.
Yeah.
And on demand.
And no planks or boards.
And I think this is probably the best evidence we have on this planet of something that does exist beyond ourselves.
I think it may be. And it intrigues me. It's going to keep me staying tuned, as they say.